So, what's this channel all about? Birds, bicycles, birds on bicycles? You might very well think that from the videos thus far, but past performance is not indicative of the future results if you read the fine print, and I've never subscribed to a no bird or bicycle left behind policy, so in a sudden plot twist we're now saying farewell to both and I'm taking you somewhere. Where? Let's just say for now it's the world's cutest island. You can probably tell by now we're not in Kansas anymore, nor are we in Warsaw. In fact, we've been in the middle of nowhere, floating in the air for way too long, and it's about time to finally land somewhere. Of course, we could just sit and listen to the engine noise and eventually figure out where it's gonna be anyway, but I'm way too garrulous to let that happen. Where are we going? After such a build-up of suspense, I can't simply say it now. Let's have a riddle instead. Ready? Name a country on the world's largest continent that starts with a T. No birds anymore, I said, for the time being, so the place you might have just thought of will have to wait for Thanksgiving. Try again. Come on, I practically gave it out already, saying it's an island. And I'd love to tell you now whether your guess was right. Unfortunately, ladies and gentlemen, we have now started our descent to destination. The seatbelt sign has been switched on, so put your seat in the upright position, fasten your seatbelt, and switch off all your electronic devices. Wait, don't. At least not until you like and subscribe and give me your liver. Okay, enough beating around the bush. I'm getting tired of it myself, so I can only imagine how you must feel. The answer is Taiwan. Taiwan is the world's cutest island. Why is it so? That would take a separate video to explain, which I might even do one day. Until then, it's cute because I say so, and let's leave it at that. Still, as we're about to touch down, I'd like to tell you about Taiwan and why I'm going there. Where do I begin? Taiwan is a sweet potato-shaped island in East Asia on the Pacific Ocean. By area, it's just a bit smaller than the Netherlands. That is, roughly a tenth of the size of Japan or Germany. What's Taiwan like compared to the similarly sized Netherlands? The Dutch buy a lot of bicycles, while Taiwan sells a lot of bicycles. The Dutch hold the top spot for the most foul-flavored cheese, the Limburger, but Taiwan isn't far behind with its world-famous stinky tofu. Part of Taiwan used to be a Dutch colony at some point in the past, and now a part of the Netherlands has been colonized by Taiwanese businesses for their European headquarters. However, the biggest difference is the terrain, not the terroir. The Netherlands are as flat as the name would have you believe. There is only a single 300 meter or 1000 feet hill, and that's it. By contrast, Taiwan is heavily rugged with nearly 300 mountains over 3000 meters or 10,000 feet each. In the Netherlands, your best chance of experiencing an earthquake was due to the gas field, but that's now shut down, so you're out of luck. On the other hand, Taiwan lies close to the Pacific Ring of Fire belt, where 90% of all of the world's earthquakes happen. Just as in the Netherlands, it rains often, but in Taiwan it also rains much more, with at least a dozen or so side notes per year, called typhoons. Between the earthquakes and typhoons, it never gets too boring in Taiwan. The climate is hot and humid, which at times feels like living in a shower stall. However, these conditions also create the perfect environment for the ubiquitous luxuriant flora. Taiwan is unbelievably green, but this greenery comes at a cost, and the price is paid in sweat. Owing to Taiwan being an island, there are some peculiar interesting animals not seen elsewhere. These include the Taiwan bird, Taiwan monkey, Taiwan dog, Taiwan giant hornet, an assorted collection of venomous snakes, and rare birds such as the Taiwan blue magpie. Some believe the Asian cockroach first identified in Okinawa originally hails from Taiwan. Taiwan, historically known as Ilha Formosa or the Beautiful Island, the name given to it by the Portuguese in the mid-16th century, has a relatively short but interesting history. The autochthonous population on the island were the Austronesian people, a vast and diverse ethnic group inhabiting islands stretching from Madagascar to New Zealand. The Austronesians never formed a single polity, but constituted a number of competing and warring tribes, which meant they eventually had to make room for the settlers from the Chinese province of Hokkien or Fujian. In the early 17th century, the Dutch established a fort in the south of the island, while the Spanish did the same in the north in parallel. There were a couple of thousand Chinese living on the island at that time. The colonizers encouraged new settlement, and soon the Chinese population of Taiwan shot up to tens of thousands of people. When the Ming dynasty was overthrown in China by the Qing and a civil war ensued, the Ming supporters who found themselves on the losing side sought shelter in Taiwan. Their leader was one Koxinga. Throughout the 17th century, the control over Taiwan passed from hand to hand like a hot sweet potato. First, the Dutch in the south kicked out the Spanish from the north. Then Koxinga kicked out the Dutch. Then the Dutch allied with Qing kicked out Koxinga's successors, since he himself had died in the meantime, and re-established themselves in the north. But soon afterwards, following skirmishes with the indigenous population, the Dutch decided it wasn't worth staying, packed up and left. Towards the end of the 17th century, Taiwan fell under the control of the Qing dynasty in China. In contrast to the Dutch policies, the Qing restricted immigration to the island. The population was to be kept at 50,000, and this number already included the 8,000 indigenous people and 10,000 soldiers. The controls didn't work very well though, and were eventually scrapped. In the early 19th century, the Chinese population was already well over 2 million people. The Qing rule did little to develop Taiwan. Their administration was largely reactive, which led to frequent outbreaks of civil unrest every couple of years. In the 1880s, north of the island was briefly invaded by the French. After they were driven out, Taiwan's status was upgraded to a province, and the victorious general Liu Mingchuan was appointed its first governor. He started a vast drive for modernization, developing industry and infrastructure on the island, even linking it to the mainland with an undersea telegraph cable. The 30-kilometer rail line built under his auspices was the third to be constructed in China and the longest at the time. However, Liu Mingchuan also had powerful enemies at the Qing court who eventually managed to force him out, leading many of his projects to be abandoned. And history had other designs on Taiwan, which soon became the first and only Japanese colony in 1895. Some locals opposed the Japanese takeover, briefly setting up the Republic of Formosa, but their resistance was soon quashed. The Japanese developed the infrastructure and industries on the island, which they wanted to show off as a model colony. However, the industries were of the extractive kind, with raw resources to be shipped for further processing in Japan. The locals were being discriminated against. For example, the newly set up Imperial University did not admit Taiwanese as students. At the same time, there was a drive for Japanization. The locals were pushed to demonstrate loyalty to the emperor by, for example, adopting Japanese names. Chinese culture was suppressed. Still, the Japanese created a framework for the economy to grow, which ushered in a period of stability. Following World War II, Japan withdrew from the island and Taiwan was handed over by the victorious US to the Republic of China, established in 1912 after the Qing were overthrown while Taiwan was Japanese. The arrival of the Chinese nationalist rule in Taiwan in 1945 brought political persecutions, which culminated after 1947, leading to the murder of 20-30,000 people, many of whom were members of the intellectual and social elite, and the imprisonment of many times that number. When the nationalists lost the civil war in China in 1949, some 2 million people, mostly soldiers and their families, were evacuated to Taiwan, which overturned the population structure of the island. The divisions between the locals and out-of-province people largely continue to this day. The same year, martial law was introduced and only lifted in 1987 after 38 years. Taiwan became a democracy in the 1990s. Initially, the political changes in the aftermath of World War II were also disastrous for the island's economy. However, the trend turned around starting from the 1960s, and today Taiwan is well known for its economic miracle based on export-led growth. Beyond the most famous semiconductor and electronics industry, Taiwan has also been a major exporter of plastics, umbrellas, bicycles, and sports apparel such as sneakers. Many of these products are now manufactured in other countries by Taiwanese companies that have successfully expanded abroad, while only the higher value chain portion of manufacturing is retained domestically. How exactly Taiwan became one of Asia's 4 tigers, or dragons if you follow the Chinese term, as tiger is not a good animal to be associated with in Chinese culture, how exactly they did it is the subject of unabating scientific interest. The political status of Taiwan is disputed. China claims it as part of its territory and regularly threatens to take it by force. This is referred to as the One China policy. Most countries pay lip service to it to placate China without actually delving into any of the details. On the other hand, the Republic of China on Taiwan also maintains territorial claims against the Communist China but has not pursued them actively since the democratization. The Nationalist Republic of China, which controlled both China and Taiwan for 4 years in the past 125 years, is the only history both sides of the Taiwan Strait, as they're often called to remain politically neutral, have in common. The status of the Republic of China on Taiwan as such is also uncertain, as when Japan renounced all claims to Taiwan under the Treaty of San Francisco, it never said to whom the island was being handed over. Much more could be said about this topic, but as you can see, the story is interesting. Modern Taiwan is a mixture of traditional Chinese Hokkien and Hakka cultures with more recent arrivals from other parts of China, but without much influence of anything that happened there post-1949, that is communism. Many Japanese cultural elements are also still present, and the indigenous cultures are being rediscovered. This is well reflected in the cuisine, which combines all these influences. The official language is Mandarin Chinese, but most local people also speak Taiwanese Minnan, another Chinese language originating from the Fujian province and also widespread among the Chinese diaspora. The Hakka is yet another variety of Chinese spoken by a distinct minority. The indigenous people have their own Austronesian languages. Most people put considerable effort into learning English, and as a result, it's not difficult to move around without knowing a word of Chinese. Signage for the most part includes Latin transliterations. The largest city and the de facto capital is Taipei in the north. Technically, the capital of the Republic of China is still Nanjing. Taipei has a smaller airport that serves regional and domestic flights, but where we have just landed is the Taiwan Taoyuan Airport in Taoyuan.
女士们、先生们，欢迎来到台北。
Yeah, Taiwan Taipei Taoyuan International Airport is the full name of the airport in Taoyuan, Taoyuan, Taiwan. Funnily enough, all three words, Taiwan, Taoyuan, and Taoyuan, come from the same indigenous root, specifically from the word they used to call the Chinese settlers. You might have noticed yourself already, I'm actually arriving here on an Air China flight. Unlike China Airlines, which is a Taiwanese carrier not allowed to fly to China, Air China is actually from China and has been for some time allowed to fly to Taiwan. On a Taiwanese airline, and there are 3 of them currently, we would maybe get a more cordial welcome to the precious island or Baodao, or at least the full name of the airport. But other than this little bit, Air China is a solid carrier, and for a number of reasons their pricing is very competitive now, so a cheapskate such as yours truly simply could not walk by. So we've only got a welcome to Taipei. The part that's left is a bit more personal. Why am I going to Taiwan? Simply put, I'm very fond of it. I first came here as an exchange student. I then spent some more time learning Chinese. That was a while ago. Last I was here, I had to leave at short notice. Never mind, I thought, I can always come back. It was November 2019, so I guess you can figure out the rest. It hasn't really been possible or practical to visit again, until now, and here I am. It's a strange feeling. I'm from a faraway place, nobody's waiting for me at the airport, yet in a sense, coming here feels like coming home. Maybe I'm just getting old and sentimental. Anyway, time to get off. And I've never subscribed to a no bird or bicycle left behind policy, so it's